This is Hannibal here from the HannibalTV.com, and I'm with the former producer of the legendary world-class championship wrestling TV show back when Texas wrestling was at its peak, none other than Mickey Grant. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fine, Hannibal, and it's great to be with you. I have so much respect for you. Actually, the idea of world class was two people's idea, Bill Mercer and myself. And that's what I prefer to take credit for, because at that time, there were plenty of wonderful fight production people like Don King, and I was fortunate that I got to got to do work for him, and I loved wrestling, and that was a very important factor because, like I say, there were plenty of people around who could. I don't have the camera mounted, so I'm hand holding. But there were plenty of people around that, had all the technical knowledge. Um, to me, what it was largely was a respect for confident wrestlers, and to me, for someone to get in the ring and risk their life, which is really what Fritz was doing, and especially his sons, was not, in my opinion, to be taken lightly. Uh, so, what do? One, you don't sit there and do a show with one camera on a wide shot with not even a camera person. I mean, to me, this is so beneath the talents of what wrestlers were doing, especially at this time. It was not easy to build an audience or to get an audience, and it was very disrespectful uh, to these athletes. And so, that was much of what my inspiration was, and Bill Mercer's. Bill, you know, he had so much respect for wrestlers. I'd seen well over 200 matches sitting ringside with Bill. Now, sitting ringside back in the 70s at Will Rogers Coliseum, you were taking your life in your own hands. I mean, I remember one night, two or three wrestlers went over the ropes and landed on Bill's table. I landed on both Bill and I, and we both had bumps and scrapes and everything. And you don't see this in boxing or anything like that. To say the least, how damaged the wrestlers were that night. So the idea came. I looked at the ratings. I was at this point, finishing my master's in film criticism.
But speaking of the Chris Adams documentary, I know one of the owners of a certain Texas company that
Ah,
is running now was good friends with Chris Adams, and I hear he has a lot of the same habits as Chris Adams had. Did you hear that as well?
yeah, yeah. I'm always hesitant to by name, speak of anybody because, yeah, I've had some of the same habits myself. If you're a young show competing against, you know, uh, these people with multi-million dollars of investment, and drugs are involved, there is first, it's extremely funny because there's nothing to celebrate. You're not there yet, you know. It sounds like an endorsement for drugs. I'm sorry about that. But, it's a long road for everybody to get up that hill and create a show that can be competitive with Vince McMahon. You know, and to me, in terms of creating a show that has a chance of thriving, a good chance of thriving, I would even go as far as check out criminal backgrounds on the people. I wouldn't want. This is such a hard thing to do, to create. Hopefully, eventually, a national show. You know, I would want to know about the backgrounds of everybody involved in it. You know, uh, get the criminal reports, get everything that's needed so nothing can come back up and bite me in the ass. If I was, trying to have a chance at doing a new show again. I got to hand it to Vince McMahon in a way. What's the British wrestler who became a GHB addict?
Steven
Oh, man.
Regal.
Who?
Steven Regal.
Yeah, 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 yeah. He put him through rehab twice. I was on Gerardo Rivera, and all the pre-interviews had been done with me, and this is right after. Oh, gee whiz! He's been in the news a lot. What's the wonderful Canadian wrestler that uh, went down the rope was done wrong. Oh,
Oh, Owen Hart, sadly.
yeah,
Yeah.
Owen Hart. It was right after, I believe, Owen died, which did not involve any kind of drugs. But Gerardo's people, his brother's the producer. It's a very economical show. You've got the brother and you've got Gerardo, and I think they got me because they expected me to blame Vince McMahon on the drug addiction problem in wrestling, and I wouldn't do that. The individual addict is responsible for that. But what I did comment about, and I'll get off this subject quickly, is Gary Hart used to say. Gary Hart was one of my best friends. He said you could line up people and you could tell who was doing steroids fairly easily, and who wasn't. But back to the point, the idea of you know let me go a little bit further. I'll change hands with the camera here. A little bit further with drugs and wrestling. There's so much of aspect, a major aspect of addiction is wanting to feel great, wanting to feel success, wanting to feel false confidence, you know. And you still have a long road ahead of you, but people would get just really pumped up that, you know, they were kings, they were queens. To me, that's a whole bunch of what this is all about. You know, we're not kings and queens. It's still a lot more work, and uh, to at especially at a point where you don't have numbers, you don't even have rating numbers to sit there and decide your big shots. To me,
Don't
there's
tell that to Teddy Long, because apparently he thinks he's the king of France or Julius Caesar without any ratings numbers.
Oh man, Hannibal. Well, that's not somebody I know, but all I do know is all that counts is numbers. Today, getting numbers, that's something that's really difficult. And I used to, with World Class Championship Wrestling, at that time, we did not have overnights. It took a little while before, syndicated shows got overnights. We were number two next to Show Train, but we didn't have overnights. I got ratings on Monday morning, and I would be the first person at the fax machine to see what they were. That's all that counts. That's all that counts with your advertisers. That's all that counts with your future. And what so often amazed me was I would be the only person standing there wanting to see that. Most people laughed at me. Uh, we became number two to Soul Train, which had been, the top syndicated show for years and years and years. Okay, so to be an owner or involved in the uh, belief that you've got a great company, if you're not at looking at the rating, if you're not, intensely on top of that, and not just that, but tracking the show so you understand what gave you those numbers, what things happen in the show that gave you those numbers. If you're not intensely on top of that, you're going nowhere. It's the end of you. And so anyone who feels great and their show doesn't have numbers, look out.
Definitely, I fully agree with you on that, and that's why I keep track of analytics and always compare my own analytics to other companies. There's a couple fan questions on there for you. As far as the point in time when in Texas you guys were more popular than WWE, what do you think are some of the things that made WCCW more popular than WWE?
Well, they weren't popular at all at that time. Here you can hear my Texas accent. Um, they were way behind us, and so it was more a matter of what did they do to overtake us. And I told my boss and the powers that be, who did not listen to me, that you know, what we're doing is too obvious. It's relatively simple. If we don't keep moving forward and doing, more incredible things, we're not going to be the top show at all. And uh, like I mentioned, my background coming from the top radio station. Well, I found in general, unless you were at network television, um, they had no, for the most part, they had no clue about, you know, TV ratings or what worked. Of course, they knew about Show Train, but and then the show sold itself. There's two or three people that worked as syndicators, and they really didn't have to do anything. All they had to do was take orders. But a real syndicator is sitting there looking, doing nothing but looking at the numbers. And if you don't continue to try to take some chances and do new things. I remember one of my last things I did. I proposed to Jack Atkinson, to Fritz. I had an idea. I'd read a relatively small story in the newspaper about this is, I'm trying to think of the year, 1984. So it was a small Catholic, I guess, Jesuit priest who ran an orphanage about 100 miles from Mexico City. And to raise money for the orphanage, this is obviously, you won't believe it, but that movie was based on this guy, Lucha Libre. He took on all comers in a horse corral every Friday night. And so I came up with an idea. This was like a 1 inch. I'm a really big time reader, and I read at that time. I read about 5 newspapers a day, which is easy to do today with the internet. But this at this period of time, I had to go downtown Dallas and buy the papers like the New York Times. But so 1 inch, 1 column inch, that's about that size story about this priest. And it stood out to me. I went to Fritz and I said, why don't we, this will mean something in a moment. Why don't we send a couple of cameras down to this guy's place and shoot him, uh, you know, taking on these fighters to raise money for the orphanage, and then do some kind of match that would involve him and the Von Erichs to, help his orphanage. Well, at that time, I didn't realize this. Gary Hart says this in his book. Gary constantly had to say that my ideals were his ideals because, and I'll get back to Vince in a second, because at that time, your wrestling was one thing. It's the kayfabe thing, and television was another thing. To me, much of what led to Vince's success was he, in so many ways, removed the kayfabe thing. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment, but he Vince saw wrestling and television as one and the same. You know, and to to me that was obvious, but you know, it wasn't. And uh, so anyway, to make it short, that my ideal didn't happen, and I thought it would have helped the orphanage and other orphanages tremendously, and it would have helped our numbers because our numbers were going down. The uh, At that time, Vince, he it wasn't even, I think, a intellectual thought process. He owned both. He owned wrestling and he owned television. So that was natural for him. It wasn't just a thought process for him. And nor was it for me. I didn't realize how serious this stuff was, in terms of the separation of television and wrestling. You know, there. Did that answer your question to a certain degree?
It did, and Bill has donated $25 to you, and
Oh, thank
David
you.
donated $9.99 earlier. So I just want to thank them because I haven't said this on the video yet, but you have a lot of medical issues, and they're actually preventing you from working right now. And
Well,
so any little bit helps.
I'm getting close to getting back to working for the first time, and I really want to do something that's involved with wrestling. I see so many, and I'm sure you do as well, Hannibal, so many mistakes that these promoters are making. And so much of their mistakes revolves around their big egos, big egos that are not even deserving. Do you agree?
100%. But luckily, WWE has so much revenue coming in. It's going to be a while before that ever catches up to them. I think Vince McMahon will be long gone, or they'll sell the company before that catches up. Somebody had a question. Is it true WWE tried to buy WCCW in
No,
1986?
what they did is I don't know about 86. I was fully involved making my movies in Vietnam at that point. My film China Run was purchased by BBC and HBO, so I had left the scene then. But Vince, all he cared about was the library, you know, and sadly, he had Kerry for a while. You know, I say sadly because he had to wrestle as the Texas Tornado. Von Erich name is copyright is not copyright, it's trademarked. You know, I'll tell you, uh, one of the most probably one of the very most talented persons in wrestling in history is Kevin. Of all the people that made me so loyal to World Class Championship Wrestling, it was Kevin. I mean, you could never meet a talk about loyal friend. Talk about that's another thing with these some of these promoters around here in Texas, especially, is what worked for us back then is if Gary said something, if he said he's going to pay you, you're going to get paid. You know, if Kevin was the same thing, they were going to do something, even if it's in the end going to hurt him, he's going to do it. You know, and uh, that's what I miss. And I think you're right about WWE, but I think there's plenty of room for some other promoters for different types, different ways of approaching wrestling that could be very successful. I don't think it's over yet. There's so many incredibly talented people out there like yourself.
Every kid that wants to get in the ring right now. Hurry up. Real quick, every kid, hurry up.
There was a bit of controversy at a certain Texas wrestling company's event a while ago that may have led to Mark Henry not being used by them again. I don't know. But I guess Lacey Von Erich, during the intermission, invited about 30 kids in the ring to wrestle with her. And I guess he had a bit of an issue with that because of the insurance reasons, in case one of the kids have fallen off the rope or fallen out of the ring or got hurt. And then there's also the kayfabe reasons, which are to a lesser extent because she was a commentator, not a wrestler, but you're wrestling around with kids selling for them. And then people are supposed to just forget about that and watch the rest of the show after. What are your thoughts on that? And would Fritz have ever agreed to anything like that, having kids wrestling in the ring at intermission?
Fritz would never have agreed to anything like that in terms of insurance, without question. So that's a big factor. If I was, and for a parent to let their kid in the ring without seeing any type of document like that, That's crazy. Well, the facility, was this a public facility? The
It
show
was
you're
a it
talking?
was a bar, but there was no waivers. This was a spur of the moment thing. I know she didn't mean any harm by it. Poor management
Yeah.
allowing something like that to happen and not giving her proper direction, and it's not
Yeah. Well,
stopping it,
see, the
knowing that those
facility,
people didn't sign waivers.
you've got to pay attention to this kind of stuff. And, so often nothing happens. But uh, when it does, if one of those kids had been injured uh, accidentally, you better be on top of your liability insurance.
Right. And at one point, there was about 30 of them in the ring, and there's one of her, and they're climbing on the ropes and stuff. She can't really save
No,
them all.
that's
But I'm
one
not
of the
saying they don't
best.
have liability insurance. I'm just saying those kids didn't sign waivers, and I doubt
No,
that kids wrestling would have been added for something that was spur of
of
the moment.
course, you have to give them a release for them to sign a release.
They don't
Otherwise,
even have their wrestlers sign releases to perform on the television show. That's
you
how.
need releases for them to perform in the facility, and on top of that, on the wrestling show. I hope that's what's happening.
I can tell you, I don't believe that's happening. But let's get on to another subject. A lot of people have asked us already because he was the subject of an A&E documentary last week. How was the Dingo Warrior to deal with? I know you knew him.
Yeah, no, just like most wrestlers, totally. I never dealt with a wrestler who wasn't professional and who I maybe I'm just lucky. Everybody I dealt with was off camera, and there are two of us. There's Fritz and Gary Hart handle the wrestling, and then I've got the television, and I never encountered any kind of bad behavior. I'm thinking to myself, did it exist? I certainly saw plenty of wrestlers get injured. I remember one night Kevin got a razor blade. Someone had dropped a razor blade and it stuck in the ring, and most of the time when wrestlers, things like this happen, they're so used to it, they just, take it, and go. But Dingo, I never saw or heard or anything that was negative. I don't know any stories. What are you hearing?
Well, I'm not asking you about negative. You produced him. What was your experience like producing him? Because they actually showed some WCCW clips of the Warrior in this documentary, and he was already turning into the Warrior when he was there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I remember all of that. I don't have any detailed experiences like with most wrestlers I worked with. They were workers. They did their job, and I'll remember funny stories that happened, but I don't remember anything that stood out with Dingo. Uh,
Another good question that a fan has is, were you around for the Lance Von Erich fiasco?
thank goodness I wasn't. I was stunned by all of that.
Yeah, and when there is an interview with him posted on this channel. I didn't do it, but if you look up Lance Von Erich, the Hannibal TV fans, you can see it. He brought up a good point that after he disappeared, they made a point of saying on TV he was not a Von Erich. It was all a big
Oh, I never
sham.
saw
But
that.
like no nobody would have like even known
Why would
because he
they
never
do
wrestled
that?
really again. So they exposed themselves of promoting a sham.
Well, who did that? Was that Fritz?
After he left the territory, and
Yeah.
again, he didn't have much of a career after that, Fritz went on TV and said, "This boy is not a Von Erich." After
Oh,
telling
that
everyone
must
he
have
was a
been
Von
when
Erich.
those new people had come in, and my legs really hurting. Just like, yeah, like I say, in '84, at the end of '84, I took a leave of absence, and I called Fritz before I did it because yeah, I sure didn't want to upset him. I cared about him a lot, and I did the movie China Run that was really successful. That's funny. My company was supposed to own the international rights, and they didn't even think anything about it. It turned out to be pretty successful. And but I called Fritz and told him what I was going to do. But that was in, when did I leave? In October '84. And I was back in January '85. And during that period of time, uh, it was like the so much of the show had gone downhill, and lots of just weird stuff. Um, uh, I loved the show when it was at its height, but as things started going down, I'm fortunate that my film career took off.
Now, is it true that Fritz was dead set against going national, as they say, or do you think he would have come around to going national?
I don't think he fully understood um, what we had going, and our was uh, people like Gary was real aware of the level we were at, and so were a lot of the wrestlers. I know Kevin was, and it's just like what is it, Mattel toys. Fritz turned down this enormous deal with them that would have made his sons a lot of money. I think it would have made him a lot of money, at least. And these were action figures, and there sure was the market out there for them. And you know uh that didn't happen. There were a lot of potentially good things suggested, and they didn't happen. I think Kevin would be far better at answering this than me, but I think that Fritz. I call him Fritz because as a kid I grew up watching him on Studio Wrestling on Channel 4 in Dallas back in the uh, early '60s, late '50s. Uh, I think he was, bottom line, local. Yeah, Fritz was more comfortable with Fort Worth, but he was comfortable locally. In fact, when I came up with my idea for a show, he was, his biggest worry was Channel 11 in Fort Worth, that was the two camera operation. Would they cancel him, because that was his bread and butter? And so he had me doing the show on a Tuesday night, and there were so few people there. I got one of my assistants to be a wrestling cheerleader because these weren't the normal wrestling crowd. In fact, I think I gave away most of the tickets to them, and they weren't cheering. And so, she helped drum up the audience like you would on a game show or something. And we did that for, I don't know, 25, 30 shows. And and then all of a sudden one day Fritz told me it was okay. And we started doing the show on Friday nights, and the Channel 11 show was on Monday, taped on Mondays and aired Saturday night. And just that dominance in the market. He had two stations with a 15 rating. That's mind-boggling. He really didn't need much else, and just dominated this market.
Take that into consideration. WWF gets 0.45 now, or
Yeah,
WWE.
yeah. Well, that's because of what's called the fracturalization of the market. Back then, any given market might have 10 to 15 stations, you know, but now, it's got via the internet. I get my news off of France channel. What is it? 25. Uh, you know, the which is in English. The uh, market is hundreds of stations now, and so like if we were trying to get our show off the ground today, oh man, it would be rough. It would be rough, you know, uh, very very rough. Uh,
I don't even think TV matters today because everybody watches YouTube and you can watch it around the world. You don't need a time slot. I don't. I haven't even had cable since 2012 myself.
Me neither.
Someone wanted to know about General Sankbar Akbar.
Yeah, I did not know him very well. Was he in Gary's stable? I'm trying to remember.
He
He
was the
was there.
leader of Devastation Inc., I believe, the
Yeah,
manager.
yeah. Uh, I don't think I even did location pieces with him. To do anything associated with the like the Middle East. Um, was very touchy. So stuff with Kamala, wonderful, but Akbar, I don't remember doing any location pieces with him.
It was just Kamala's birthday the other day. Of course, he passed away
Yeah, I've
not too long
been
ago.
following that. Yeah.
Any thoughts on him? Any memories to
Oh, he
share?
was absolutely wonderful. He used to play cards with Gary's sons, and that had gone on for years. And even when we were at the Metroplex Arena, which is another story, I saw him playing cards with them, and we did some great location pieces with him. He was wonderful to work with. Two of my favorite pieces were, um, I found out because I did the I did a lot of jobs to get by. One of them was I did the traffic reports on KVIL, and so I was at the airport a lot where the Learjets were parked, and I found out that as long as I didn't show the tail numbers, um, I could get by with like someone exiting the jet, on the stairs, that type of thing. I did a piece with him with Gary and several guys dressed in safari outfits with him arriving in the U.S. And I couldn't get away with doing things like this today. I'm just thinking about it. Oh man, um, one of my favorite pieces was we had him out in these woods, near. In fact, it was an apartment I had previously lived in that was connected to next to a golf course off of Ferguson and I-30 in Dallas, and we had him in the woods, and Gary was saying that they had him there so it could be next to his natural habitat. And I mean, uh, he was fun to work with. I'd always wanted wrestlers to throw a bill, and Bill did not like that. And that was one of the days I succeeded. You know, uh, Kabbalah picked Bill up and threw him into some bushes.
What are some of the other favorite vignettes that you did? Because I think WWE took a lot of your vignette ideas in the later 80s and into the 90s when introducing new characters.
Yeah.
I really like the one with David and Jimmy Garvin, I believe
Oh,
it
that was
was.
one of the best. People talk about that every day with the skeet shooting above him. Yeah, that one's really popular. Yeah, well, I know during the time of Michael Hayes, he was a lot in charge of writing then. You know, he used a lot of similar ideas, and you know, the thing is, I really kept trying to move further, and I hated single shots of these kind of things. So I got into like in a movie or in a soap, doing reversals. I found wrestlers were very good at working with me and the camera, and instead of just one wide shot, we had moved on to where we were, you know what a reversal is. If a character is talking and you get a over the shoulder shot, for instance, of who they're talking to, or over the shoulder from the person, you know, the other person. I mean, you create a rhythm to where you can cut back and forth. And yeah, a whole lot of this, in my opinion, is one, understanding production, but two, when I say production, not just the kind of camera you have or something, but you know, doing everything possible to heighten the reality, like using, you know, not three cameras, but three angles, and cutting it to where, you know, it flows better, it moves better. And you know, to me, this goes back to having respect for the wrestlers, you know, going to that extra trouble to help them to look good. Does that make sense?
Well,
I'm
this
actually
man,
good.
Rick Brooks, he wants to know if you ever encountered Buzz Sawyer, who was in the Texas territory for a while.
Yeah. A name rings a bell immediately. I'm trying to remember. I'm sorry. I'm 71 and my memory is becoming a piece of crap. It's not gone yet, so don't write me off, but it's
Yeah, well, you could
getting
keep
there.
it in the back of your head.
I will. If I think of it later tonight, I'll send you a message.
How was it working with the females back then? Because I think WCCW is the first promotion I know of to do the cat fight successfully and really
Oh man.
popularize it.
Yeah, well, Fritz pretty much there were I don't want to categorize them with midgets, but there were several Hispanic competitors that were, you know, on tour in the territories, and also midgets. And oh man, I'll tell you, when in doubt, run some matches with some midgets. Talk about the making the audience laugh. And there were some outrageously good wrestlers. amongst the midgets. But most of the female wrestlers back then were Hispanic, and they were really good wrestlers. I mean, really, these were tough matches.
Did you notice? I know in recent years, and it's gone a little overboard in some situations, there's lots of allegations and complaints with males and females. In my company, I always try and have a separate female dressing room, but I know back then
Right.
there were so few that they would be mixed in with the males. Was there much issues
No,
between them?
I never ran into any kind of issue like that at all. Um, Never ran into it.
So, if you were in charge of an upstart company or in charge of the television show, what would you do these days to try and revive wrestling? Because every company seems to be doing the same thing. They all say they're going to go back to the old Texas style, like a certain Texas company that now has kids wrestling in the ring and the boogeyman eating worms. But they all end up doing the WWE style. No one actually goes back to the old school.
No, I think you're exactly right. What needs to be done? I First of all, the handful of people who worship WCCW. Well, if you did what we did today, that's not going to work. It's got to be something which is attuned to the way world communications is. um, you need to be popular everywhere. You need to be popular in Japan. You need to be popular here. You need to be popular in India. You know, if you go that direction, which is not going to be easy, you can. When we say the word world, no one's ever really done that. Why not do the world? You know, uh, with the internet, it's possible, and involve a world audience. You know, uh, there is so much potential out there. I think we've only seen a microscopic aspect of what it can be or it can become. I think in coming years, uh, it's going to be gigantic. It's going to be mind boggling. I'm talking about world wrestling, you know, and if I was one of these characters like you were talking about, I'd be using the words galactic, but I'm not. Uh, uh, you made me think that one of the biggest problems with so many of these promoters is ego. And in the 60s, I was a real hippie, and I was a follower of Swami Satchidananda. He was the Swami that opened Woodstock, and he had this great expression. He would to teach us about ego, which is in Buddhism and just about everything, and as far as I'm concerned, in Christianity as well. Ego. To get rid of your ego. And I find it's the killer. If you're trying to make a movie or something, it's what will kill the production. And it's the stereotype of Jethro Bodine from the Beverly Hillbillies and he actually did become a movie producer, but and fairly successful. But the character he played was mild compared to most of the there are people who have studied, like me, who studied their tails off, have 2 degrees in film, and worked really hard, And the goal is, no matter what it takes to do a good film. Then you have these characters who want to get rich and famous and make a film. And you know, I mean, they're characters. They're doing it for with a belief that, you know, this is great bar talk. They can, you know, uh, you know, get all the babes, all that kind of stuff, and it's ego. You know, it's ego, and I mean, man, every time I've turned around, you know, film's worse than wrestling. But that's what I see. I see these people who, you know, the whole point is to party, you know, and act like big shots, and big shots way before they're even slightly big shots. And you know, next thing you know, you're out of all your money. And
I'm going to play you like a 10-second video, and you tell me if you think this guy's ego is too big. Just watch
okay.
this.
Tom Lance, you know, he's been, you know, really an outstanding guy too, man. You know, he's gave me, you know, a lot of leadway and, you know, let me, you know, kind of, you know, run things and don't bother me, you know, kind of like my own boss, you know, because a lot of indie, you know, organizations, they don't make it. And I'm not blowing my own horn, but since I went in and started working with those guys, they, you know, I really turned things around and they're happy and I'm happy. And we just, you know, trying to do what we do.
Wow. Do you think it's ever smart to make someone their own boss that isn't an actual investor and doesn't have financial stake in a company and give them the right to make decisions without consulting owners?
I'm sorry. I'm just completely I can't relate to that at all.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. Cameron wants to know your overall thoughts on Fritz von Erich.
Fritz, you know, was, oh, what a complicated person. You know, I'm not the one to ask. Kevin would be the one to ask. Fritz, he he was so imposing from his handshake. Uh, the worst thing I ever did, one time he and I were at a little diner I like to go to on Harry Hines, which is not the upscale part of Dallas. And I bit into a corn on the cob, and you know how sometimes one of those little pieces of corn can just like shoot out into the other person's face. I did that to Fritz. That was maybe my second or third dinner with him, but he had a tremendous sense of humor, and he was, to me, he was very good to me. And that's all I can say, because the other stories are different and complex. And uh, let me just leave it at that. You know, I don't like talking bad about someone if they've not done harm to me. It's just like, to me, someone who talks about a wrestler doping or something, and I wasn't there and they're dead. I'm not into that. I really am not.
The guy that tipped you $2 earlier has now tipped you an additional $5.
Wow, I must have said something.
Although his math is a little off. He says it was meant to be $5, so now it's $8.
Oh,
but in reality, it's
well,
7.
Let's keep going.
And another fan here wants to know about Percy Pringle, who got his start.
Well, I wasn't around Percy that much. You know, I told you what my schedule was and the thing. All I know is, Percy, if he's listening, he left his
he's dead. I'm sorry to tell you he's dead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've kind of, when I said that, I remembered it. At my age, it's, you know, doesn't really matter if you're dead or alive, hardly. Percy left his coat at the Sportatorium um, Bill and Gary and I tried to get it back off the ground. The main reason why, really, was Jack, whose family had a 99-year lease with it, and he also owned the parking lot, wanted the money from the parking lot more than anything. And we went back into the sportatorium because Jack was going to, it was going to have a new fire inspection, which I can hardly believe it had ever had a fire inspection. And so he had to get somebody in there. So he pretty much gave it to us. We tried as hard as we could. But I remember one night under the bleachers, we found Percy's coat that he famously wore all those matches. And I don't know what we did with the coat, but that's my Percy story.
There's a guy on here that's asked a few times, did you have anything to do with the music of WWC, the intro music?
Yeah, overall, my orientation as a manager was to make the other people. There was a book called In Search of Excellence at that time, and I did my minor in management when I got my master's, and it preached to let other people own your show. You become kind of like a godfather. And the guy, any kind of music, I would say, is Dan Bynum's. I'll promote that. Dan Dan should have been the top MTV producer in history. He all those music pieces all throughout the show, uh, they were Dan's. I mean, Dan. See, today you really can't do that because of synchronicity rights. And if you sync music up with video and it's a commercial TV show or film, uh, then you have to pay for the rights. Back then, they weren't enforcing it very well. I'll put it that way. But Dan was a genius at it. Oh man, was he good! Dan Bynum. I'll say his name several times. Dan is, he still looks the same. That's what's amazing. Dan, I look like this old guy. Dan still looks like he's 30 years old. He's someone I really, really enjoyed working with.
Now, what advice would you give to wrestlers as a producer?
Man, I'm probably the last guy that would have advice. Chris, when he had his wrestling school and his incredible video that he made, Chris was the only person I believe who was really, really, really good at helping teach wrestling. And that was because he came from the dojo, the way it's done in judo. And I had several years of background with a man named Vince Tamura, who had the best judo school in Dallas. In fact, in Gentleman's Choice, we shot some at Vince's school. And it's fine. Find someone like Hannibal to help teach you. And if you're not running a school, just ask questions to any that's besides getting my degrees in film and TV, I ask questions, lots of nonstop questions. I think Bill Mercer would tell you that too. It's amazing. Bill's still thriving. What an amazing man. And I'll see young people who are trying to be play-by-play people, and they don't know anything. And if you don't have a teacher like Bill, then listen to top play-by-play people, learn to mimic them. When I was like 12 years old, I first I started with a wire recorder. I would intro records and practice. Then I was really lucky. At I guess 14, I got a Radio Shack. This is back in the 60s. A Radio Shack 2-channel reel recorder. And so I'd have the song on one channel and then me on the other. Well, I ended up, doing that all nights at the top station, and uh, becoming pretty well known in it. But that's how I started, you know. And so I think wrestling's the same. What would you say, Hannibal? Is it a good idea to pick a like Savat? Am I saying it correctly? French kickboxing. I had an office in Holland upstairs from the top Savat. Is it Savati or Savat?
Savat, I believe.
Yeah, teacher in Europe. And, there's very good martial arts teachers all over the place. The one thing I did really learn how to do half decent was fall. My judo teacher, and I started judo in, I guess, the ninth grade, and he would use me as the demonstrator when he was teaching new throw. And one, because he said I could handle pain well, but two, I really got my falls down and my rolls. And there's so many things. I think if that's what one's um, you know goal is, look for those kind of things and be fanatical about them. Be fanatical about them.
Now, this is a good question. Somebody wanted to know, how much did the WCCW wrestlers make back then? What would be the high and the low?
Well, all that was, and this is a good point, but all that was kept so secret. Oh, it was unbelievable. I know I won't even get into that, but some people, when they came to town, like Ric Flair, they're going to get a percentage and they're going to make a lot of money. And that's a very controversial subject. And there's, a few people listening that I'll sound like a know-it-all or a bullshitter if I try to get into that. So I apologize. I've got to get off in a moment because I ran a room in a house and they're about to go to sleep. I've enjoyed this so much. This is, the phone hasn't gone nuts.
Last question here. This is something you may have some intel on, so I'll just ask this quickly.
Yes, sir.
Jesse wants to know if Lacey Von Erich or her husband had something to do with the Blood Hunter leaving.
Well, I don't, I think I met Lacey one time when she was a kid, and she was at Kevin and Pam's house. So I wouldn't know that. That's a really good question. Maybe you might have more insight. I'm sure you would have far more insight into that than me.
I've only heard rumors, but I do understand you knew her husband a small bit. But where can people follow you on Facebook? Thank you for the tips. I think you got about somewhere between $30 or $40 in tips, but you also have a GoFundMe.
That's going to get me through the next few days. Thank you.
There you go, and you have a GoFundMe, Mickey Grant.
Yeah. It's real easy to find me. It's let me try to figure out how to say it. My PayPal is www.paypal.com. No, excuse me. .me, M-E, paypal.me/Mickey Grant, MICKEYGRANT, Mickey Grant, MICKEYGRANT. Okay. And also I have a cash, what do you call it? Cash App. And that's $, Mickey Film. And then well, between those two, that pretty much get my face in right. That pretty much covers me. And on Facebook, to join my page, which I have a huge amount of wrestling fans on, it's uh, Mickey Film. Again, just remember Mickey Film, and you can find just about everything. Uh, MICKEYFILM. Unfortunately, film doesn't have the enough letters to make it sound like mouse. But and you've got it posted too. I think we've got what 120,000 or so viewings of Gentleman's Choice on your page, Hannibal.
Yes, you allowed me to post your Gentleman's Choice movie on my channel, Gentleman's Choice Chris Adams movie. If any of you want to watch his movie, search it up. It's a great movie. I watched it twice.
Oh, great. Well, if you don't mind, if you could put it at the top of your page for the next day or two, that will make it real easy for people to find me.
Yeah, and you know what I'll do? I'll put it in the description, and I'll pin it to the top of the comments along with your GoFundMe to make it real easy for people that want to help you out. So by the way, David Miller just tips you $9.99.
Well, hey, David, thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it.
I'll let you close this off, Mickey. Always a pleasure. You have great accomplishments. You just had a bit of a hard life the past few decades. But your wrestling program that you created is much, much better than anything out there today.
Thank you. Well, the last few decades weren't all that hard. The hardness basically started when I fell off of a roof in Libya. And I kind of went away from wrestling to shooting wars. And I love wrestling, and life today for everybody is pretty difficult. And one way we all can become friends, no matter what side of politics you might be on, is wrestling.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Support us on patreon.com for $1.99 a month to watch our full shoot interviews ad-free and help our channel grow. Follow us on Twitter at the Hannibal TV for instant updates.